The morning light hit the glass of the penthouse, but the shadows remained deep, clinging to the corners of the room. Anya, the AI assistant, began the briefing without a pause. Tokyo Summit at 10, Foundation call at noon, lunch with the president at 1. The words hung in the air, precise and heavy. The protagonist sipped the Ethiopian coffee. He checked the display on the side of the carafe. It was exactly 68 degrees, not a fraction warmer, not a fraction cooler. He set the cup down on the marble surface with a soft, hollow click. Anya continued, her voice devoid of inflection, listing the global demands that required his immediate attention. Every minute of the day was mapped out, a grid of obligations that left no space for hesitation or change. He looked out at the city, the light catching the edges of the skyscrapers, but he saw only the logistics of the day ahead. There was no warmth in the sun, only the requirement to be somewhere else. He listened to the list, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup. He reached for the tablet, his hand moving with practiced, fluid efficiency. He signed the acquisition papers with a single, sharp flick of his wrist. The digital ink glowed a vibrant, electric blue, pulsing once before vanishing into the network. Across the globe, the market reacted instantly. Millions of shares shifted, fortunes realigned, and entire industries pivoted based on that one solitary gesture. He did not watch the ticker tape. He already knew the outcome. His security team moved into the room in absolute silence, their presence felt rather than heard, guiding him toward the rooftop helipad. He paused at the floor-to-ceiling window before leaving. Below, the city stretched out, a sprawling, complex circuit board of light and shadow. He traced the lines of the highways and the clusters of the financial district with his eyes. He had wired this city himself, laying the foundations of its current pulse. He understood every connection, every power draw, and every point of failure. It was a masterpiece of his own design, yet as he turned away, the silence of the room felt absolute. He was the architect of everything he saw, and yet he was entirely, utterly alone. The Tokyo Summit Hall was a vast, echoing chamber designed to amplify power. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell into a sudden, deliberate quiet. Former rivals, men who had spent years attempting to dismantle his influence, now bowed their heads in unison. It was a calculated display of submission, a physical recognition of his total market dominance. He walked to the center of the podium, his footsteps ringing out. He tapped the interface, and the AI prototype flickered to life, projecting a complex, shifting light across the ceiling. The crowd erupted in applause. It was a wall of sound, intense and sustained, yet to him, it felt thin. He watched the faces in the front row, noting the forced smiles and the rehearsed enthusiasm. The applause did not carry the weight of genuine achievement. It sounded like static on a radio, a meaningless frequency that filled the room without touching him. He stood motionless, his gaze scanning the sea of people. He turned toward the exit, already calculating the next move in a game he had long ago stopped enjoying. The yacht cut through the Mediterranean, leaving a white wake in the dark, endless water. Inside the main cabin, the evening ritual commenced with mechanical precision. Dr. Eris Thorne leaned over a glowing tablet, his finger tracing energy grid projections, while Elena Petrova reviewed treaty clauses with rapid, clipped sentences. The chef entered, placing a 7-course meal on the table. Each plate was a masterpiece of geometry and color, served with a silent, practiced grace. The protagonist watched the steam rise from a dish, the scent of the food sharp and rich, yet it failed to register as anything more than a sensory data point. Around the table, laughter broke out, a rhythmic, rehearsed sound that bounced off the walls and died before reaching him. He looked at the faces of his guests, seeing only the reflection of their own professional ambitions. They were experts, brilliant in their fields, yet every word they spoke was filtered through the lens of the empire he had built. He picked up his fork, the weight of the silver cold against his skin, and took a bite. The flavor was perfect, yet he felt nothing. He was surrounded by the pinnacle of human achievement, served by the finest hands, and yet he was entirely alone in the center of the room. He pushed his chair back, the sound of wood scraping against the deck sharp and intrusive. No one looked up. The conversation flowed on, uninterrupted by his departure. He walked to the edge of the deck, the air cooling rapidly as he moved away from the cabin lights. He reached out and gripped the cold steel railing. The metal was biting, a singular, sharp sensation that cut through the numbness. Below, the ocean spray hit his face, salt-heavy and bracing, yet he felt nothing. He looked out at the horizon, searching for a point of reference that wasn't a projection or a metric. There was none. He realized then that every decision he made for the last decade had been calculated to move billions, a series of inputs and outputs that left no room for error or deviation. He tried to remember the last time he made a choice that did not involve a spreadsheet, a forecast, or a risk assessment. He could not. The memory was gone, buried under layers of global demands and market shifts. He stood there, a prisoner in a cage made of gold, watching the dark water churn against the hull. The empire he had built was a weight, a physical pressure that held him in place. He was the architect of his own confinement, and for the first time, he understood that he had no control over the direction of his own life. The next morning arrived with a gray, flat light that offered no warmth. He stood on the deck, watching the horizon line blur into the sky. The schedule on his tablet was a perfect, unbroken chain of events, each block of time accounted for with ruthless efficiency. Then, the silence of the deck shattered. A sharp, rhythmic vibration hummed against the wood of the side table. He turned. The phone screen pulsed with a name he had not seen in 3 years. Sarah. He stared at the glowing letters, the hum of the device vibrating through the surface of the table. The air felt heavy, suddenly charged with a static that had nothing to do with the ocean. He picked up the device, his thumb hovering over the glass, before he swiped to connect. There was a moment of dead air, the faint hiss of a satellite link, and then her voice cut through the distance. It was thin, crackling, yet unmistakable. "I need help with the old house," she said. Just a signature on a property deed, nothing more. He stood frozen, the ocean wind whipping past him, the sound of her voice pulling him back to a time before the empire, before the spreadsheets, before the cage. He looked down at the tablet, still clutched in his other hand. The screen displayed a relentless list of global demands, market projections, summit agendas, and high-stakes acquisition timelines. It was a digital map of an empire that required his constant, absolute attention. He toggled the display to the yacht's navigation map, a blue line cutting across the Mediterranean, locked into a pre-programmed course. He looked from the list of demands to the navigation route, then back to the phone that still hummed with the echo of Sarah's voice. The contrast was absolute. One path led to the continuation of a life he no longer recognized. The other led to a house he had not stepped foot in for years. He did not hesitate. He pressed his finger against the screen, selecting the first appointment, and swiped it into oblivion. He repeated the motion, faster now, clearing the afternoon, the evening, and the entire following week. Each tap was a physical release, a digital severance of the ties that bound him to the boardroom. The screen flickered as the data vanished, leaving behind a blank, white space. He watched the last of the notifications fade away, the empire dissolving under his fingertips. He had dismantled the schedule that defined his existence in less than 10 seconds. The silence that followed was not the heavy, oppressive quiet of the morning. It was the sharp, clean silence of a clean slate. A small, real smile broke across his face, the muscles around his eyes relaxing for the first time in a decade. He set the tablet down on the railing, the glass clicking against the cold steel. He turned and walked toward the cabin door, his stride purposeful and unhurried. 2 members of his security detail stepped out from the shadows of the corridor, their hands instinctively moving to their communication devices. They blocked the path, their expressions trained to anticipate his needs. He did not stop. He did not acknowledge their presence, or their silent, questioning stares. He simply stepped into their space, forcing them to pivot and clear the way. The physical act of walking past them felt like shedding a heavy, invisible skin. He felt the weight of the CEO title, and the endless, suffocating expectations fall away. He reached the deck, the wind rushing to meet him. He was not a man managing a global empire anymore. He was simply a brother. The air felt lighter, and he had no idea what the next hour would bring. He climbed the stairs to the bridge, his boots rhythmic against the teak. The captain stood at the console, eyes fixed on the pre-programmed digital path that had guided them for years. He did not wait for the captain to speak. He reached over the console and manually disengaged the autopilot. The screen flashed a warning, a red pulse of data, but he tapped it into darkness. "Change course," he said. His voice was steady, lacking the command-driven edge he used for board meetings. "We are heading home." The captain hesitated, his hand hovering over the controls, looking for a confirmation that would never come. The captain turned the wheel. The yacht groaned, the massive hull shifting against the weight of the water. The engine pitch deepened, a low, vibrating hum that signaled a departure from the established route. He stepped out onto the forward deck as the vessel swung wide, leaving the familiar path behind. He stood at the bow, the salt spray stinging his skin, the cold wind pulling at his hair. There were no spreadsheets. He was not a CEO anymore. He was just a brother, and for the first time in 10 years, he was finally free.